We got a couple more minutes. Another presentation, huh?
Excuse me?
Another presentation.
Yeah.
So you can buy one of the small homes? You're gonna buy one of the small homes? I don't know, 4,000 square feet for the lot is pretty nice.
Oh, it should be here.
You're in an apartment, right?
Huh?
You're in an apartment?
No.
You're in a home? Changed.
We don't have to wait about the magazine.
That's right. We okay. This is, I guess, a personal escape. Anderson would have to here.
Yeah.
You think so? Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll now call to order the meeting of the Winter City Council on Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. Tracy, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Lauren. Here. Councilmember New.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cowan.
Here.
Mayor Biazzi.
Here. Thank you. Councilman Dozie, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up, we have approval of the agenda.
Mayor and Council, there's no changes to the agenda.
Move to approve.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. We move on to council and staff comments. Councilmember Lauren.
I'm happy to report that over the Thanksgiving break, I had no meetings and I did meet with the city manager yesterday to review this agenda.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Yes. No meetings except for Tuesday.
Consider moving that with the city manager to review the latest agenda. Renew.
I didn't have too many meetings, but I had, on Thursday, the 21st of November, I had a SACOG meeting in Sacramento. On the 25th, Monday, I met with, full group and people interested in, more fully utilizing the swimming pool. And, on the second, I met with, Chief, Brad Lopez, talked about, part of what's on tonight's agenda and just what's going on in the fire department in general. Oh, and I met with John Dunleavy, our city manager, at 3 o'clock.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Callen.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Well, most of what I did was all on the same day, on the 20th. Kathy and I were interviewed by Aaron from the Express for an article about the tractor parade. And then also on the 20th, I had a short meeting with Cal regarding the LDS property. And also on the 20th, I attended the Citizen of the Year selection meeting at Preserve that the city manager was also part of. And were you there, Harold?
No.
And on the 29th, Black Friday, my son Matt and I spent just a couple hours in the morning getting Jose from Ample Electric and his crew going on the lights on the tree. Something I'm more than happy after 10 years not to be spending 18 hours in that basket. So hopefully we get them all on there by Saturday for the tractor parade. So that's all I had.
Thank you. On the 21st of November, I met with our Express reporter, Brandon Capes, to talk about the Olive Grove issues. On the 22nd, I attended the chamber board meeting. And on the 28th, I went down to the community center along with my wife, and we helped deliver meals for the community dinner for Thanksgiving. Councilmember New, his wife were there as well. It turned out very well. They got a lot of people, and delivered a lot of meals, so just want to thank everybody involved. And it takes a lot of people to do it, and there was a really good crew down there working, making all the meals and eating it. And last thing I have is on December 2nd, I met with city manager to review tonight's agenda. Thank you, everyone, for all your time. Good job in taking some time off for the rest of the day. So, good. We all need it. Okay, up next, we have public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. If anyone in the public has anything, we have sheets in the back to fill out, and you can pass it up to the front to Tracy. I have 2 that were turned in so far. The first one is from Deborah Palmer. Would you like to come forward, please?
Good evening. My name is Deborah Palmer. I live on Graff Way in Winters, and I'm here representing the new Winters Senior Commission on Aging. And this is just a public service announcement. For those who don't know, our first meeting was held last month. All 8 of us were present. We will be meeting monthly. We hope to have the meeting dates posted on the city website at their earliest convenience, and our location. Our next meeting will be this coming Wednesday, December 11th, not this Wednesday, but the 11th. And our first agenda will be to firm up our meeting dates and subsequent agenda items based on our roles and responsibilities. And we welcome any input from the public on their issues or concerns that they'd like to bring to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard it was a really good meeting, so thank you. The next one I have here is from Tina Loudon. Let's take the good news for the second one.
I do. Good evening. Excuse me, I just came from another meeting. Mayor and council people and everybody, and people in the back. I represent Winters for the CBOC, which is a Citizen Bond Oversight Committee at Solano Community College. I just thought I'd let you know. We don't hand out the paychecks, but we're charged with almost $400 million. And we've been doing a lot of great things at the Solano Community College, including the one in Vacaville and Fairfield and Vallejo. And you know, we've had a lot of hype on it. But I'm really excited that Rod Diamond, who's the Vice President of Finance and Administration, he told us some good news. Can imagine your house is maybe worth 500,000, it's at 5%, and then the interest rate went down to 3%. Oh, let's go for it. Let's go for 3%, so you save a lot of money and you save a lot of interest. Well, he did that for our bonds, which over a period of time, it'll probably save $21 million. So it's worth looking at. What does that mean, bottom line? For Winters, city property Winters people, you're going to get a decrease, not this year though. The good news is next year, but we know Waste Management's going to take the money. Sorry, John. But I was really excited about the good news of that. And if anybody wants to know about Solano Community College as far as the bond issues are concerned, you could talk to me about it, kind of. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time serving on that committee. We appreciate it. So anyone else in public that would like to speak on a non-agendized item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar.
Mayor and Council, a couple of items tonight. Item A are the minutes from the regular meeting on November 19th. Item B is the street closure request from the Chamber of Commerce for this weekend's annual lighted tractor parade and tree lighting on Saturday night. Item C is a grant deed for a public utility easement in Newt's Expressway. This is for a transformer box that's going to go into the alley as part of our Route 20A undergrounding project. And then item D is an amendment for the Solano County Water Agency. This is for the installation of 4 groundwater monitoring wells that are going to go located just about right next to the car bridge on Good Creek. And that's the consent calendar.
Okay, so I believe 4 of the 5 council members have a conflict on item B because we live too close to where the tractor parade route is. So we're going to draw a long list to see who gets to vote and who gets to not vote on agenda item B on the consent calendar.
So we have to bring back 2, right?
Two stage voting lines on that. Abstain from that.
It's written in red on the side of the map.
I didn't want to vote anyway.
Okay.
Stay.
And you got the stick. So it's Pierre and I that won't be voting.
Councilmember New and Mayor Pro Tem Callen will not be voting on consent calendar item B. Any questions on the consent calendar? If not, I will open this. Yes. Okay, and Councilmember Anderson has a conflict with item C due to his proximity. But he will not be voting on item C. Okay. All right, so Councilmember Anderson has a conflict with C and D, but he will be able to vote on B because he got proper one. Anyone have any more questions?
We'll do approved consent calendar.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously with the abstentions and zero. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to discussion item number 1, which is a public hearing for consideration of proposed tentative map for the LDS subdivision plan development overlay zone.
You want to start?
me back to the beginning.
We're gonna go ahead and start.
Yeah, I think I will.
Slide one.
So the item before you tonight is twofold. You are being asked to approve a tentative map for an 18-lot subdivision on the remnant parcel that wraps around the LDS church on the end of Anderson, or what was the end of Anderson, no longer is. And you're also being asked to amend the zoning map to add a PD overlay to the existing property that's shown as the subdivision, not the church itself, but to this portion only. And that will allow for a PD permit to be approved, which permits a number of reductions in the city standards without allowing them to exceed the permitted density for the property. This item sort of began with began way before that, but the first public review of the map came at the October 3rd DRC meeting, in which the applicant, Crown Communities, explained to the DRC committee what their objective was for this property and how it had changed from when they initially met with staff and proposed a greater number of lots and then had reduced it to the 18 that you see here tonight. Their objective was to allow them to provide lower cost housing because they would be building smaller houses than they would have built if they had stuck with the original plan, which was to essentially build similar houses to what they're building in the Heartland subdivision that they also control. And at that meeting, I think the idea of building lower cost housing, less expensive to buy housing, was received well by the DRC. On the November 12th Planning Commission meeting, this map was considered along with the PD overlay that you're being asked to approve tonight, and as well as the design review of the model homes. You won't be considering the design review. The only way you would is if it gets appealed to that particular aspect of the project is going back to the Planning Commission, be on their agenda for next Tuesday. Let's see if I can do this. At the Planning Commission hearing, one of the issues that came up had to do with the EVA, or emergency vehicle access. A secondary point of entry into the subdivision is required because of the length of the street and cul-de-sac exceeds 500 feet. And according to our standards, that's typically when a second point of access is needed. It doesn't have to be a public access, just that needs to be designed so that emergency vehicles can get into this area if the primary access is blocked. And the green line or shading that you see, highlighting that you see, overlays a truck turning template or a fire engine turning template that shows how a fire engine can maneuver through the subdivision and through the church's parking lot to get to the EVA access. That was one of the major things that was discussed. And one of the things that will be discussed probably by the applicant is where you see the corner of the turning movement as you're heading back out towards Anderson. If you probably can't maybe tell, but the street has been widened. It's 35 feet and 35.5 feet as you come up the street heading north, and then as you make that turn to head east, the actual width of the street was widened, and that again was to accommodate a fire engine being able to turn and head south towards Anderson as it's leaving the subdivision. Our standard in our improvement standards calls for that to be a knuckle, which is not what this is. A knuckle is sort of a top end, sort of half cul-de-sac kind of idea. The one I brought up at the Planning Commission meeting, which won't probably work for you, is Commissioner Adams lives on a knuckle in that part of the city. And again, it's designed to, again, allow a fire truck to maneuver around the turn without having any obstruction in the way. Let's see. One of the things that was also discussed was if you look at the street leading into the subdivision, on the east side, you'll see a series of blue cars. We worked with the applicant to eliminate the sidewalk on that side of the street because the sidewalk doesn't really serve any purpose. There's a sidewalk on the opposite or west side that allowed the street to, allow the lots to be deepened by taking that distance away from the sidewalk and adding it to the lots. As I mentioned, you're being asked to approve a PD overlay, and the PD overlay will allow a reduction in the standards of lot size, side yard setbacks, and rear yard setbacks. They will not exceed lot coverage, but they come close to meeting the maximum of 50%. Here's sort of the table that was included with your packet. It shows the varying deviations from the standards. In the staff report, I do discuss that there is the possibility of having some 10-foot side yards. Those two lots that you saw at the turn, lots 7 and 8, could theoretically have it, and there's a couple others. And all we were mentioning in the staff report is our zoning ordinance encourages a 10-foot side yard setback to be on the garage side of the house. And that's so that I think the eventuality that the property owner may add a parking pad on that side and allow them to park another vehicle off the street, even an RV. So that was one of the recommendations that the planning commission supported, was to provide for that capability. Patio cover. So this is something that came up both for the Winters Highlands subdivision and the Stones Throw. My personal experience is people buy houses, and if the cities haven't considered this as a potential use that will be created, what happens is the homeowner comes in to try to build a patio cover, and invariably they don't meet the city standards. So we have suggested both in those previous two subdivisions that were approved in this one, that they provide for a reasonable patio cover as part of the PD overlay process that could be added to the back of these homes. And in this case, similar to what was approved in the other two subdivisions I've already mentioned, the patio covers come within as close as 5 feet. The zoning code allows them to be with as close as 10, so it's about a 50% reduction in that setback. And it only applies to the patio cover. And when you look at the layout of where this site's located, as you know, to the north is a school, to the east is a school, to the south is the church. So really the only lots that would theoretically be impacted, ironically, are the ones that the Heartland people are already building on. And those are those 6 lots that you see on the west side of the street as you enter. And this is just the varying examples of what patio covers could potentially be added to each of these lots without going over the 50% lot coverage. This one lot I just show because this is sort of the odd duck in the whole scenario. It both is odd in the fact that the house that will be built on this lot will be different than all the others as far as the footprint. And again, because of the irregular shape, you can see that the patio cover is somewhat long and narrow. Been quite a bit of discussion again today at the staff level about the knuckle versus the no knuckle, and how that, if I get back there, whether or not that should be allowed. That's really not staff's call. The planning commission did recommend it be approved the way it's shown here. There is maybe some misunderstanding as to whether or not the fire department found it acceptable. I think my understanding is they would still prefer the knuckle, and Fire Chief Lopez is here tonight if you have questions about that. But in the end, the planning commission was at least convinced that this would allow for a fire truck to make that turn without being obstructed by anybody parking on the street. And so with that, I'll try to answer any questions that you might have of myself, or answer them later if you come up with some later.
I have a number of questions, but I'll wait until after the public hearing. So if there's any questions from the council members, you can hold up. So, all right, and we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing at 6:50. Anybody in the audience would like to comment on this agenda item tonight? Yes, please come forward to the podium. State your name and address, if you would, please.
My name is Rodney Orozco. My address is 1017 Taft Court. I just want to clarify, so that overlay up there was or was not approved by the fire department? Because you mentioned that it was a fire department template, but you didn't say if that was our fire department.
Yeah, I would say they were aware of it. There's some question as to whether or not they were supportive of this, this alternative.
Fire chief can answer that.
I can speak to that. So the discrepancy we have is what appears to be a conflict with what the city has established as a standard for a knuckle, and then also providing for adequate fire access. What's provided here in that specific area does demonstrate visually that, a fire apparatus will maneuver within that area, but in this particular map, it didn't provide specific dimensions on what that radius is. So that's what staff, and I've been working with staff to get that clarification. The city standard is 70 feet from curb to curb, if I'm not mistaken, Dave, and this was modified due to the unique feature of this specific land to accommodate that. The other thing was accessibility just with the road widths and clarification on parallel parking widths. The city standard is shown at 8 feet. However, we found in a table that also illustrates a 7.5 foot parallel parking dimension. So that will in fact impact the overall accessibility width of a street and roadway. The minimum fire code for a road width is 20 feet. So that's the lowest that we go. Obviously, we want more if we can get it, but the minimum is 20 feet.
Thank you, Mr. Roscoe. You have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Laddish, please come forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And there were a number of comments that I brought to the Planning Commission when in the November meeting, but I'll try to focus these on the items, the aspects that are brought up by the emergency access. And so as discussed at the November Planning Commission meeting, just the consideration about the necessity for 2 points of entry and exit for emergency vehicles. And I would encourage the city to also think about 2 points of entry and exit for residents. If there's a problem at the civilian entrance and exit the way that it is now. And I'd like for us to think ahead about how people are going to get out if they need to, and that way is blocked. Since a lot of the thinking is how to include a lot of, as many houses as possible in a small area, and that's an unusual shape. So I appreciate that there's been a lot of thinking about how to do that. I'm concerned about if there's a portion of this where there's no sidewalk, and if that is in order to accommodate the fire trucks. I'm all for fire trucks having access. If that creates accessibility issues, that is something that I would like the city to continue to consider. And also to make it so that there can be emergency access. There are no planting strips in this. And so that would axe out the opportunity to have street trees, which Councilmember New mentioned at the last council meeting was something that he's interested in. And so if it's a narrow street and we already don't have room for a sidewalk, it sounds like there's not also room for a planting strip. And so no street trees. And then just kind of getting back to something that is probably more of a planning commission item, but since it ties into design review, and that's some of you, that as discussed at the last planning commission meeting, that these houses are affordable, lowercase a affordable. They're affordable, hopefully affordable by being basically less nice than some of the other houses in town. And so that's not actually a guarantee that these houses will remain affordable, that they won't be truly in the affordable housing stock the same way that officially affordable housing is. And so I'd like for us to consider that as we think about how much we're willing to deviate from how we normally do things. Because there's no guarantee that these are actually going to be truly affordable and affordable for people who live here in town. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this agenda? Yes.
Peter Meyer, 21 East Abbey Street. You know, I noticed this is real close to the ponding basin that overflowed numerous times last year, that flooded into the Foxtrot neighborhood, I believe is the name of the road. I was just kind of curious, have you guys taken that into any kind of consideration? I mean, you're planning on covering these houses, about 50% of the lot, and that's excluding any walkways or any of the roads being built or driveways or anything. And that's before the the landscape, everyone's going to not try, but drought tolerant. So I just want to know if that's been taken into consideration, especially since that caused about 4 or 5 lawsuits in the last year. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Bonino.
Might be worried since you know my name personally. Brian Benino with Long Arm Nickel. We're the civil engineer for this project and several others in Winters. So as far as just going back to the street width, city standard is a 35-foot curb to curb street width. This subdivision has 35.5. So whether you're parking, different cities have different standards for parallel parking. So I've seen them from 6 feet to 8 feet. We're somewhere in between here. So but the street width is per city standards. If we have an issue here, we have an issue with the 300 homes we just installed on the west side of town. So we gotta make sure, we'll follow city standards, but this project for the most part is following city standards except for the knuckle. The 2 things we did on the knuckle is we increased the inside radius from city standards from 40 feet to 45 feet. So that would be on lot
15, I think.
lot 15. So we increased that radius to increase the movements for the fire truck movements. And knuckles, there's two reasons to have a knuckle. One is to provide the turn movements for larger vehicles through the knuckle. And the other one is to provide frontage for the parcel. It's kind of like a cul-de-sac. City standard says, you usually have not as many, you'll have a big lot on a cul-de-sac, but a small frontage. You're trying to provide frontage for parking. So your standard on a cul-de-sac is to provide 3 stalls, either on-site or 1 off-site, 2 on-site. So in this case here, we can provide either of that. With this one, you can do a 3-car garage for these houses if you wanted, or a 3-car driveway to put them on-site. But we don't think that's necessary. And what we did here in this exhibit is we put cars everywhere. It doesn't mean cars should be parking there, like the inside corner for lot 15. Technically, that should be marked no parking. But for this exhibit, we just put cars everywhere to show that would work even in a worst case scenario. You can eliminate on lot 15 on one corner, there's a fire hydrant, so you're not gonna have parking at the fire hydrant. And then you're gonna eliminate, then around the corner, so you can eliminate that. Through that knuckle, you should have plenty of operation for that. Any comments or questions on that?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Mr. It's Bonini?
Bonino.
Bonino, sorry, I didn't hear right. So in the houses that you're currently building, do they have mow strips? Not the ones in here?
The other ones on there, 610 have almost.
They all have mow strips?
Yes.
Okay, so just, this has nothing to do, I feel like I'm crossing a line because it's a design, it could be design, but, in my personal experience with, my husband has been in a wheelchair of late. And, we live on a part of town that doesn't have mow strips. So it means that we can't use, any sidewalks because of the angles. So for him to get out of the house, we have to, push him to the street and walk him on the street, to get anywhere. And I would just imagine that with this design, that if you had anybody that had any limited mobility, they would have to, use the street, especially if they were in a wheelchair or walker. And then, they have these, limited visibility also, and if there was an emergency, they would definitely be in the street. So it just seems like a nice, maybe a concept way to use space, but not really a safe way to use space for somebody that has limited ability.
Yeah, I understand, it's a good question. I mean, most cities are trying to go to the most strips. Obviously, it's an infill project, so you look for alternate ways. The city does have what they call a low-profile curb and gutter and sidewalk combination, where basically your driveway can drive over the sidewalk. So the sidewalks in this subdivision are all flat, there's no dips in them at all, it's all the same elevation.
And just to clarify, it was mentioned before, there's no sidewalk on that east side that borders the LDS church. But on the other side where the lots and the houses is, there's still a sidewalk, correct?
Correct.
And the rest of the way around the development. It's only where it borders the church property that they eliminated it for
Yeah, the
street.
frontage in front of every house has a sidewalk.
I have a question on this, on that same topic on parking. So you're showing on this drawing, this is a little bit different than the one we have in our packet. But, like lot 15, there's not a fire hydrant right there in front of the house?
Yeah, there's a front fire
We have a car
hydrant.
parked right in front of the fire hydrant. And you're
Right.
counting that, in that table, it shows how many parking spaces each house could have. You're counting that as a parking spot.
Well, we did it so many different times
And even
there, I'm
you
not
know,
sure where we ended up with the
Well,
count.
to me, I look at that table with the counts on there and it does not seem accurate. Even where we have, on this drawing, you're assuming 5-foot setbacks next to the driveway. You have a car parked there, so that would be a 10-foot spot, and you're gonna try to park the car in a 10-foot spot. You're gonna be a very
Well,
small
yeah, like
car,
I said,
a
for
small
this
car is
exhibit-
about all you're gonna get in there.
For this exhibit, we wanted to show cars everywhere as a worst case scenario, but you're right.
But you're counting those in that table, which I think is kind of misleading,
Yeah.
because there's not that many spots.
Yeah, we can update that if you want. It would still show that we're meeting more than the required amount of parking for those, especially since we have no houses along the north-south road on the east side.
And I know the original drawings that were presented that have the larger knuckle there was, it was explained that that really didn't work for this project because it would take too much property off of those two corner lots, is that right?
Well, I believe that is correct. The desire for the developer to do all one-story houses. So if you took, basically, you'd almost be committed to two-story houses on those two lots in the knuckle. If you're gonna do a standard knuckle, it would take, they can speak to it better than I can, what the product they can put in there. But basically, you'd have to go to a two-story home, which is against what they were trying to do here.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
So the public hearing's still open if there's any other,
There's one other question regarding
Yeah,
drainage, but
okay.
from the public.
Sure.
So this property was designed to be part of the Rancho Arroyo detention basin project. So it is included in there for design. There's a whole lot of reasons we can go in and spend 5 hours why the pond overflowed, but basically it comes down to there's no power, the project wasn't complete, and well, there were a lot of circumstances that went into it, so a complete pond with power for the pumps and everything shouldn't be a problem, but that pond was halfway full, didn't have enough power for any pumps out there, they're all just temporary pumps, so the full facility wasn't built, and that really was part of the big issue.
And that's completed now.
Yes, it has power now, yes.
thank you. Okay, other public comments or the public hearing is still open?
I just have a quick comment.
Yeah.
Cal Thacker with Brown Development. The details for the turn for the radiuses on the fire truck turns or the details on the street, we as developers rely on those city details when we get to this phase and make this investment to submit the map and do the engineering and do everything that's involved. So those details are what we rely on. Just wanted to touch on that. And one last comment, I think you guys will really appreciate when this is built, the difference in the way this is gonna feel when you drive down that street versus some of the other projects that have been approved within a quarter mile of this project that are the narrow shallow design. So the perception as you're driving through or walking through, you have wide lots that allow the look of the subdivision to not be so congested with lots of cars because you don't have any parking and that sort of thing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Cam Tackar, Crown Development. I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions on the PD overlay with respect to the setbacks. If you like, I could put up a slide that could show kind of what the rear yards look like as far as dimensions. And again, only if any of you feel that is necessary, I could give you some more detail on that.
Maybe after we close the public hearing, we'll see if there's any other questions that come up. and
Great.
We can address some of those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak during the public hearing? Ms. Fleisch, do you have no comments?
Sorry,
All right.
that's one I didn't say. And then Tracy, I can remember to hand you my paper. All right. Here, yeah, take it down before I forget. All right, 8/400 Morgan Street, number 21. And the item that I forgot to say is a question about, with the patio covers, and just to make sure, since it sounds like a large portion of this would end up being covered if there are a bunch of patio covers being built in addition to the houses. And so I want to make sure that that is calculated in when we're considering what the stormwater runoff is going to be. And because it's going to increase what the infiltration is, infiltration or percolation versus what's just going to go flashing straight into the stormwater runoff. And so I'm just hoping that that's going to be included. And if things are going to be pre-approved, I would encourage DRC or whichever body would have the ultimate authority to look at least semi-permeable paper, something like that, rather than just covering everything with impermeable. All right, I think that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak during the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:08. We'll see, council member questions?
I do have a question, that is, we are approving part of this, and I want to know, when that was brought up, the low-cost housing, is that low-cost housing going to match the state requirements?
So they're gonna meet the requirement that the city has for a certain number of houses, 3 in this case being affordable. The other 15, there's no restriction on the sale price. It's just that because they're smaller in size than what's being built, the presumption is they'll sell for less. So they'll become more affordable by, like Kate said, with a baby A, lowercase a. And they will be.
But the 3 that are low-cost houses?
Those will have to
That's fine, thank you.
comply with the city's inclusionary ordinance.
There's no in lieu fee or any of that worked out yet for affordable housing agreement, right?
Can't answer for Dan McGuire, but they will have to do
Don't
that.
believe.
I don't think it's been settled yet.
They'll have to put together an affordable housing plan that'll have to go before the Affordable Housing Steering Committee.
And they'll either have to make 3 of these units sold as affordable housing or pay an in lieu fee.
Correct. And that's pretty typical of
Yeah.
what's happened with
So
other
they've done on
buildings.
all the other developments.
And this is real comparable to Olive Grove, which is 21 months.
If I can make one comment, I've reached out to Dan, he's
Stand up
gone.
so everybody can hear you on the microphone, please. There are people at home watching too.
I've reached out to Dan, he's on vacation, so when he gets back, we'll begin.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, just for clarification on Kate's last question about the lot coverage, the runoff and stuff. Didn't I hear you say earlier about the patio covers, that's factored into the
Correct.
typical
Correct.
50% allowance for
Correct.
lot
I mean,
coverage?
there would be slightly a little more coverage because you can overhang 2 feet. So you could have a 10 by 20 foot patio and theoretically a slightly larger patio cover. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same as if you just didn't have a cover at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Dave, part of her question had to do with, semi-permeable or permeable pavers because of the water, the cascading water.
We've not required that, in other subdivisions. It's not to say we couldn't as a city, but we've not required that of a developer. So that would be really, I guess as she mentioned, would probably be something that the planning commission could consider when this comes back before them as part of design review.
A couple of comments if I can. I sit on a DRC committee, the design review committee, so I saw this project back when it came to the DRC. And it's like, it's a pretty unique piece of property that's kind of, it's an infill thing, and so it kind of leads for special circumstances, which is what you have here, because there's not much other way you could do this. I'm personally never a fan of real small lots, but I know a lot of people like that, and they like higher density and less yard to take care of. And the other thing that was appealing to the DRC as a whole, I think, was the desire to do the houses as single story, and also having the price point less than what the houses are that are being sold now, because smaller lots, single story, all that. So I think those were the things that the DRC looked at as pluses, is smaller houses, less of a price point, and some people like having no yard to take care of. So this would suit them just fine. So that, I think the only concern, it was brought up then, and I know it's been talked about since, and I've actually had conversations with Cal about this, is the only thing that could throw this whole thing and make it disappear is if the LDS church doesn't grant that easement for the EBA access. That could, that could throw a giant monkey wrench in this whole project. So I know that's a key component for the conditions of approval and stuff, is that easement, and that's something that I don't think you've yet gotten anything official.
They're
from
okay
them
with
yet,
the
right?
EBA easement,
So-
they've already agreed to that in writing.
Because that's, something I know was a concern for sure. So, okay, that's all I got.
So you say they sent you something in writing,
They
making sure that.
Yeah, we have an
city
agreement
knows?
with them, they've already agreed to the easement, the EBA easement.
Now, the city had asked for that, and I wasn't sure if that was provided to the city at this point. Have you provided it?
Yeah, they did ask, staff did ask for a copy of it, I forwarded the addendum to.
I got it, I haven't been
Well,
gone.
okay,
So I'll have to look.
Well,
I'll have to
sent
look.
to staff, it was emailed.
Okay.
Yeah.
The developer provided a copy of an amendment to the purchase and sale agreement with the LDS Church. And one of the conditions of close is that the LDS Church would provide an easement. It's not specific as to the direction of it or anything, but we included in conditions of approval that easement would have to be in place in order for them to file their map. And so, the way I read it, if the LDS Church refused to provide the easement, they'd likely be in violation of their purchase and sale agreement.
Thank you. Good.
So we're covered on it.
I'm not sure I feel really clear about the knuckle, the street width and safety. So I was just gonna see if Brad could address it again.
As far as clarifying that?
Yeah,
So, really just, we need to identify, what the parallel parking dimensions are and what's gonna be presented, in this design, whether it's 7.5 feet, 7 feet, or 8 feet. Because that's gonna dictate, the amount of accessibility. If it drops it below 19 or 20 feet, say 19 feet, because of the parallel parking dimensions, that's gonna be, below the fire code requirements.
So is that something that, we need to know before we make a decision?
Just one of the things that Brad got the same email, and Brian's here, so he can answer the question. I also sent it to Brian. Whatever parallel dimension we pick, right now it's 35.5 foot curb to curb. If you use 8 feet, it would be 36. You would take a half a foot up each of those first 6 lots and make them shallower by half a foot. That would allow you to get to the 36 feet. And obviously you could do the same as you make the turn and go down the court, somehow take off a half foot. You could take, 3 inches on one side and 3 inches on the other. So it can be accommodated, council member. There is the unfortunate thing that our chart says 7.5 and the illustration shows 8 in our standards, and that needs to be rectified. But it's something that can be accomplished. And I would say, and this is a council call, you could definitely restrict parking on the turn of lot 15 because there's still enough parking spaces on that frontage for a visitor that's visiting somebody on that lot. So you could, starting with the fire hydrant, you could wrap around the corner there, and that gives a little more wiggle room for a fire engine to maneuver through that corner in case of an emergency. That's just a suggestion.
Could lot 15 have the 3 parking spaces in their yard?
That's another alternative. Might require slightly relocating the fire hydrant. I don't know if that's a problem or not.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yeah, listening to the comments about the parking and no parking for pedestrians. Couldn't that be designed with some in-between areas, even if it's just brick or pavement, where a wheelchair could, there'd be a couple places where they could get across to the sidewalk on the other side. Talking about the emergency vehicle access and what people on wheelchairs.
The only thing, Councilmember, is you're literally walking through landscaping if you come from the street into the church property. In other words, the sidewalk on the east side of the street fronting the church property has really no effect other than providing a second way for the residents to get to the street. The church goers, you're encouraging them to literally walk through the church's landscaping. So it doesn't benefit the church. And as Mr. Benino mentioned, these sidewalks are going to be designed in such a way that you won't have the sort of this tilt that occurs when you go from a sidewalk to a driveway. It will basically stay relatively flat. So if you bring somebody across the street in a wheelchair anywhere along the frontage of the church property, there's nowhere really to go other than to the parking space that's on the other side. I mean, there's no connecting point that they can connect to the church by crossing the street or anything else. They'll simply be able to get to a parking space, and the sidewalk's going to be designed to allow for that ability to cross at any point.
If they park on the east side of that entry street, there's no place for a passenger to get out. There's no sidewalk there. How do they get out of their car?
Well, they can get out.
How much space is going to be there?
Well, I mean, they're going to step onto the church's property
Right.
to do so.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of sketchy. I have a slightly unrelated question on, although this is pretty important. Where do you get the names Gurmit?
Yeah, that's.
And I mean, the city of Winters has put a lot of time into having street names that match our city. So the Carnell and the,
Yeah, that's, we've explained that to the applicant. They don't get to name the streets, unfortunately. Those are named after family members from their family. And in this particular city, I told them there's a process that you get to go through, and you have to name the street based on the process. They can name the subdivision, whatever they want to name it. They don't restrict that, but the streets are the name that shows them by the city. So you can really sort of ignore what they say on the map. When the map actually comes forward for being recorded as a final map, it will have the street names that the city has selected for those 2 streets.
just to share what the logic was behind the street names, it was our dad was Carnell, and our mom was Gurmeet. And Gurmeet had passed away just like a month ago, or 2 months ago, and we were talking about it. We have named picked a lot of street names in the past, but one of the reasons why we did that is because they were proponents of smaller houses and simpler living. So that's the reason why we did this, because originally, as Dave discussed, we were gonna go for the larger homes, fancier type of stuff, but that was just a thought process that, we had come up with, and, we just wanted to honor our parents, because they would have said, don't do the big fancy dancy houses, keep life simple and build simple houses so families can afford them. So that was the logic behind it.
Got it, thank you. Do you have any more questions? No? I have several questions or concerns with this project. Number one, I don't like reducing the setbacks as much as we're talking about doing here. I mean, the houses that will have neighbors just to the west of them, lots, I think, 1 through 7. That, from the back of the house, even if there's no patio covers on those, you're gonna be pretty close to the other yard right there. Have any of the houses to the west there been sold yet?
They're under construction right
But
now.
not sold. I just want to make sure that when people buy those homes, if this project is approved, that they know that there's going to be a house behind them, if it's going to be very close, that needs to be disclosed. Yeah, but none of those have been sold at this point.
Not at this point.
I have a tangible that I could share exactly how close those houses are gonna be.
I've
if you like.
seen all your presentations at the design review committee meeting, at the planning commission meetings. I've seen all your presentations on it. I know exactly what it looks like on there.
So the 14 and 17 feet, or the
Yeah.
15 and a half, depending on what the
The
final.
5-foot setbacks, I'm not a fan of that. I like to have the 10-foot setback on one side because I know people do want to add that extra parking on their property. So I understand this is I see what you're trying to do with this property. It's a very tough piece of property to develop. It's an odd shape. I appreciate, you say you want to try to build single-story houses, make them affordable. We've made concessions before to make smaller lots and things like that, but most of those had deed restrictions on them, not all of them, but a lot of them did, where they had to be affordable houses. These do not have any deed restrictions on them, so there's no guarantee that they'll be affordable, other than, as I think Planning Commissioner Baker stated, it will be affordable by design would be the only thing, because they're a smaller lot and a smaller house. That would be the way that you're planning to keep the price down, but we have no guarantee that they're gonna be affordable. So that's a concern for me, that there's no guarantee on that. And I know at the planning commission meeting, there was a lot of talk on the design review, things that were suggested by the city staff to do to break up the looks of the house and the roof lines and the things. And none of those were agreed to at that meeting. I know it's been continued to another meeting, so at this point, we don't know if these houses are gonna look all the same. That's gonna come back to a future planning commission meeting. The access, I just have a problem with, the whole way it's laid out. I think we could find a better project for this property, whether it's townhouses, something like that, or duplexes, where we could build the houses with 0 lot line setbacks, things like that, might be a better fit for this project. And I know you guys have spent a lot of time looking into this, but in my opinion, I have several issues that I'm just not comfortable with approving on this. Other comments, questions? No? All right, if no one has any other comments.
Can I share something regarding the design?
Sure.
So,
To the microphone, please.
Okay. I want to keep my presentation very short, so as city council members, you guys have not sat through what I would call the evolution of this project. Well, you have, but not everybody here has, sir. So, originally, we were gonna come in and build 28 homes, and I didn't, David asked that I keep my presentation very slight. The whole knuckle situation was something that we were understood that was a thing of the past, so I didn't, but basically, this project's evolution is a function of what City Planning Commission and City Council had really prescribed to us. We came in here originally with the mindset of building 22 single-story homes, just like normal. And for us as a developer, that is the most lucrative way to do this project, okay? But every time we came on the other project, it was, how come you guys don't build smaller houses, okay? Whether it was at the DRC level, or at the Planning Commission level, or at the City Council level, or if I'm at the Buckhorn having dinner and people are so nice in Winters that you start the whole, how you doing and what do you do and all that stuff. And there was 2 or 3 different conversations, actually 2.5, let's say, where I just struck up a conversation with a complete stranger, and they said, well, thanks for building houses in Winters, but we can't afford them. Let's face facts here. The typical starting entry point for new home ownership in Winters is approximately $450,000, okay? So we had a planning commission, a DRC, and a city council saying, please build smaller homes. How come we can't have 1,400 to 1,800 square foot homes? How come we can't have cheaper homes? So us as a developer, we kind of started looking at this whole project through a different lens. And that lens was, okay, well, city council said this, DRC said this, planning commission said this, members of the community said, thanks for building houses, but really, how many local people can afford these homes? So what we did is, instead of taking our normal concept of maximizing profits and building homes and putting in the knuckle and doing all these things, we actually thought that, city's leadership was going to be very excited about it, because there's finally a solution for 18 families in the city of Winters to be able to buy a new house, okay? And I think that we have provided that opportunity, is for people to be less than that 440,000, okay? Again, that's our goal, but even if we tried to be over 440,000, they're gonna go buy a 2,000 square foot home. So I personally have some disappointment with the evolution of this, okay? Because we have spent probably about $100,000 on this project, in design, engineering, attorneys, everything, okay? So we're kind of at the finish line right now of, does the city of Winters want to have 18 homes for local residents, okay, to be able to buy a house, okay? With respect to this setbacks, Mr. Mayor, I thought we were on the same exact page, because you sat through the DRC. There was never a mention about any rear yard, that you didn't like any of those, okay? Because then we would have abandoned the project, $75,000 ago, okay? But, so we're just kind of sitting in here, and I'm kind of displeased that, we thought we were doing a good thing. With respect to a 5-foot setback, and again, I'm happy to put this tangible up there to show you how much backyard there will be in each lot, if you guys would like to see that. But, having 10-foot setbacks because there's a possibility that someone may want to park another car. In every municipality that we've ever dealt with, okay, for homes of this nature, we have never, ever had to have a 10-foot setback just because somebody may want to possibly park a car there. Our vision is more about these 18 families that could come in here and buy a house. There might be 18 families that don't really care if they could park another car
on the side of their house. Not everybody has, we already have parking for 3 cars. There's 2 cars on the driveway. You can park 2 cars in the garage, that's 4. In most of these houses, you can park 2 in the front, you got 6 cars, okay? Not everybody has that 7th car or that boat or those luxury items, you know, so that was our objective. That was Crown Development's objective, recognizing that, you know, we're building this 110 lot community in Heartlands. And, you know, we saw this as a way of truly giving back to the community to say, let's not look at this like normal business, okay? Let's take this 23 lot home project that was gonna be nicer homes, and now let's go ahead and let's reduce the density, because these lots are in no way, shape, or form small. These lots are considerably larger than probably 250 plus lots that have been recently approved out here in the city of Winters. So the lots are not small, okay? With respect to, I just forgot my point I was about to make. You know, with respect to the setbacks, we talked about that. So, you know, as a developer in this town trying to do something as an answer to the call of the community and the leadership, and here we are at the finish line, and we're at risk of it not happening, is what I'm hearing. You know, so so we're doing our very best here to try to make it happen. But these lots are not small, and you know, a 5-foot setback or having to have a 10-foot setback on a side of a house, I could drive you to 600 communities or 25 different municipalities that don't have that feeling, that you can have 5-foot setbacks on both sides of the house. So, you know, it's subjective. If one person says, I don't want this, I don't like this 10-foot setback or this 5-foot setback, but really on this project, it's really about 18 families in Winters, you know, would they have the ability to come in and buy? So, does anybody want to see what the setbacks look like as far as the rear yards are concerned? I have a tangible to show you.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I think that is okay.
Okay, because on the rear yards, just along lots 1 through 7, our setback is defined as 14 feet. That may be as much as 15 and a half on our smaller plan. On our larger plan, it would be a minimum of 17 to a max of maybe 19 and a half. The lots that the mayor was referring to was our lots behind lots 1 through 7. The requirement there is 20 feet, and that's what we have. You know, 20 versus 19 point something or 14 point something, that's not a huge delta, okay? Another thing that I wanted to address, just so everybody's clear, on the design process that we've been going through with the Planning Commission, at that last meeting, yes, it was tabled to say, let's make some adjustments. We have agreed to absolutely everything that the planning commissioner or the planning director has proposed. And last week, or week before last, we had a meeting with our architect and the planning director. And we basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I think that we've given you everything that you wanted from a design perspective at this point.
I'd say 95%. There are a few comments that I've made, but I think relatively minor. They've improved a lot. In fairness, they've improved a lot. There are a few minor suggestions I made in the staff report.
We went ahead and added the masonry veneer. We've changed the roof lines. We've dressed up the elevations that he wanted to that were visible from the street. You know, so is there any other questions I could? Okay. Again, all I ask is that we take into consideration that not everybody in Winters has the opportunity to buy a new house in Winters.
there's no guarantee that these are gonna be bought by Winters residents who live here now. Anybody can come in and buy them,
Well, but it will,
right?
of course.
Okay.
But at the same time, they have an opportunity. Right now, they don't. They have zero opportunity, you know, so that's all that we ask, that you take those people into consideration, because they can't buy right now. And again, this is just people telling me, you know, saying, we can't afford your homes, we can't afford your homes, we can't afford your homes. So again, in closing, the evolution of this, and it's been a long evolution, has purely been a function of interaction between what DRC wanted, what Planning Commission wanted, what the city council had expressed. So, you know, I just hope that since we're right here at the finish line right now, that, you know, we approve this project today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from council?
Yeah, I'll say.
Okay.
I heard what has just been said, and I agree with quite a bit of it. And I do serve on the SAGOG's Land Use and Natural Resources Committee, and for the last 4 months at least, we've been talking about smaller houses and more affordable houses, different ways of looking at houses. And so what the mayor suggested as possible, we didn't say duplexes, but townhouses, thank you. And things like that, I think they're all necessary. We're going to have to come up with some houses to, either that or we're going to have more people on the street. And we already have that. That's not our biggest problem now, but it's a very large problem for many cities and getting worse. This isn't my favorite development, but I would say it's a start in the right direction. I don't want all of the new houses built in Winters to be like this, but certainly having some I would support. I would also, again, think that when people start talking about building in Winters, we should talk about alternatives. And I know that there are people that want big houses on big lots, and that's an alternative as well. But we do have to give some thought to those people that need a place to live, and that's it. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
I have some comments. I just want to address that, you know, I understand that you've done a lot of work, that you've put a lot of time into this, and that we share many values. I share the value of having smaller homes, affordable homes, of being able to offer a price point to people that live in Winters. And with that said, just because I also value safety and I also value the work that has been done in the city of Winters to have a value set for building in Winters, for having safety and setbacks and turning radiuses and knuckles and all the work that goes into safety. Just because I value your opinion and that we share those values does not mean that I don't value safety also. And in this situation, I feel that it would be appropriate to wait until the December 17th meeting and let you, with the, you know, Dave Doswell and the Planning Commission, just get a little bit further, like you're really close. But I would be more comfortable waiting for 2 more weeks before making a decision.
Comments?
I'll just comment, I think, the little bit of issues with that one turn with the fire department and a couple of those parking spots and stuff, I think can easily be dealt with at a staff level, between Dave and the rest of the staff and the developers of the fire department. Because this has got to turn into a final map before it gets final approval. So I think that can be handled internally. I I have no doubt that they'll work out those problems or those issues before the things has a final map.
No more comments, then we can open it up for a motion to either approve what's been presented tonight or continue it to the further meeting.
I'll make a motion to, staff recommendation, adopt resolution 2019-48 and introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance 2019-05.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. We have 2 in favor, 3 opposed. It does not pass. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to go back to the drawing board and see what we can do on it.
So, Mayor, if the intent is to not approve it at this point, my recommendation at this point would be that we continue to tie them to the 17th so that there's specific findings that you have to make before you deny a tentative map.
Okay.
And so I would recommend you don't have a resolution making those findings in front of you today. So I would suggest to the minimum that you continue this to the next meeting so that we can have something in front of you that allows you to follow the proper procedure for a denial if that's the direction that you decide to go.
So then, motion that we just.
So that motion did not pass, so nothing happened,
Yeah,
right?
so.
And
So I'd like to make a counter motion that we postpone
That
for
we continue it until
continue,
the
yeah.
December
17th.
17th meeting.
Yes.
So we have a motion to continue it. All in favor, or is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of continuing this till the next council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item tonight, we have agenda item number 2, which is consideration of the third amendment to the franchise agreement with USA Waste, Waste Management. All right, let's talk about trash.
Everyone's favorite. Good evening, Mayor and council members. We're coming to talk tonight about third amendment to the franchise agreement with Waste Management. This is allowing for an annual increase to the service rates and also to change our bulky pickup, our annual bulky pickup that we usually have at the courtyard. As you know, we've had a 10-year franchise, which we approved back in 2017. And that allows for some rate increases, namely the CPI increase and also extraordinary circumstances. Generally, those tend to be tipping fees. As you know, we take all of our trash to the landfill, Yolo County landfill, and they tend to raise their rates annually these days. And so rather than coming back every year with having to do the whole Prop 218 process, by adding this amendment to the contract, it will allow us to do the Prop 218 public notice now, and that will be good for a 5-year time span. So we won't have to come back and do this process every year, because Prop 218, we have to do the notices to everyone and come back in 45 days. Generally, we haven't had a really good response from the community on that process, but it's just time consuming and fair amount of work for city staff and waste management. So we're asking if we can approve the amendment to amend the agreement to allow for that CPI increase. On the bulky event that we normally have, usually in the spring at the courtyard, we can pretty much bring, the list has gotten shorter on what they'll accept because we can't do hazardous waste anymore, and it's not difficult to get some of the other items that you can take to the landfill. We can't really manage that at the courtyard. So that list of what you can bring to the courtyard has gotten a little smaller. The program they've tried in other cities is to instead give you a voucher. So you get a voucher at the beginning of the year. It's good for 1 year. basically one trip to the landfill free, and you can load up your pickup and take your load down there. And then in that case, you would be able to add all your paint and oil and your light bulbs and all the other stuff that we can't bring here. So it's a pilot program we wanted to try and see. We've had a little better, I know people like coming to the courtyard because it's convenient, but the city of Woodland has tried this and they had a much better response at bringing stuff to the landfill. Of course, they're closer to the landfill, so we'll see how that flies. But we thought it would be worth a try at least to see if that is a better match for people in town. And they have the flexibility of taking it any time of the year, not just that one day that we have the event at the courtyard. So that gives you a little more flexibility. We're estimating the average increase of the CPI for this year would be about $1.50 for most households. So, and tipping fees, we don't really have any control over that, but they tend to, this year to last year, they went up about between $2 and $4 for each type of trash versus green waste, so per ton. So this
That came out to per household.
it's hard. I don't understand how they do that. We have lots of staff here who can
Okay.
explain that, but overall it's $1.50 per household for added for your bill with this new CPI, which includes the tipping fee increases. So the CPI increase went up and started July 1, and they're not planning to make this retroactive. So we'll start whenever we get the public process done. There will though be July 1 another CPI, so it'll be a shorter possible jump depending on what comes down the pipe on CPI in 2020. So, but they aren't planning to make this retroactive, so we'll have gotten 6 months without having to. They've absorbed that cost. So. We have lots of their staff here. If you have any other questions or concerns? I'm estimating that if we get this approved tonight, the letters would probably go out about the public hearing by the middle of December, and then it would be coming back to you February 4th to approve the new rates. And so,
Questions from the council?
Questions?
Councilman Rams.
I've gone over the staff report with the city manager today. And we've gone over the agenda and the voucher program in particular. The voucher program, by definition, is excluding a large number of people who don't have a truck.
that's true.
And I'm wondering if you couldn't have like a coupon book or something, where people could drive over there and get the coupon punched with the garbage bag full or whatever it is, that they could haul in their car or get somebody else to haul it.
So they can have multiple trips so that it comes out to the same
Yeah,
pickup size load, but they're doing it in multiple. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, I do want to say that you guys also still have the option of curbside pickup. So not only do you guys usually have had the bulky event during the year, one time a year, but you also have the curbside pickup once a year, which will come right to your curb and you put the material out and we'll pick it up. So you have both options, which you guys, a lot of other areas don't have that. They only have one.
And that's
So-
for bulky items only, right?
Yeah.
The big stuff.
Yeah, the bigger stuff. Yeah. And so the benefit to going to the landfill is that you can take your household hazardous waste, your pesticides, your lights, your paints, your mattresses, and now futons effective as of January 1, all to the landfill for free, which you wouldn't be able to have those options if we continue with the bulky program here at the courtyard. So the landfill takes those every weekend. So whether you do it during the week or on the weekend, they'll be able to accept that material for free. So it's just added service to you guys and your residents.
So what items can people take to the landfill regularly and be charged or not charged?
So it just depends. So if you use the voucher, you get to take all your bulky items. I believe it's up to 5 yards that we did it for free. So that could include whether it's a mattress, old TVs, you can take electronics, household hazardous waste, all that stuff on the weekends. During the week, if you don't have the voucher and you're just going to make a trip, the landfill has set rates for that. So it depends whether you're a resident or you're a commercial business and what those materials are.
So if you want to dispose of household hazardous waste, you have to pay.
Actually, those are free for residents.
Those are free.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And but those are only collected on the weekends there.
Only on weekends.
Yep.
But you can take it for no cost.
Mhm.
Well, it's paid for on our monthly bills, but yeah.
Well, some of that is producer responsibility. So,
Yeah.
And what all's on that annual curbside? Is it the same items that the voucher would cover?
No, actually, yeah, so as far as the bulky items, it is the same, yeah, but the other benefits that the Yolo County landfill has wouldn't be. Yeah, so it would just be the bigger bulky items, so you could have the voucher, as well as your curbside per resident each year, so you still get both options.
One of the issues that we had in our overall discussions on this is the fact that the types of items that you can take on the bulky item drop off has been shrinking. You can't take household hazardous waste. Typically, we haven't been doing the e-waste. You can't take tires. Going to the landfill is absolutely full service. You can take all your bulky items. If you don't have a truck or something like that, you also have the ability to have those things picked up curbside. But when folks come to the courtyard, in the past, they used to take everything. Bring it over, we'll get your tires from you, we'll get the household hazardous waste, oil, all that stuff. You can't do that anymore. You go to the landfill, you absolutely can. It's full service. And as Carol pointed out, we want to do this as a pilot. When people go to the landfill, they're going to find a lot of opportunities on green waste, on construction waste, on the e-waste, on the household hazardous waste. And hopefully it'll give folks an opportunity. We're going to track how many people go. We know how many people have been coming to the courtyard. We'll track this. We'll do more marketing. And it gives an opportunity to try and give people a chance to, literally, you can clean your garage out and get everything. You can't do that at the drop off. And, that's one of the primary reasons why we've tried to bring this as an option, because it certainly gives more opportunity. And if it doesn't work, guess what? We can go back to doing the bulky drop off at the courtyard.
Yeah, and just for example, I know we had mentioned Woodland actually just went to vouchers last year and got rid of their bulky program, but so did Yolo County. And we just extended Yolo County's contract for 10 years, and they removed any curbside pickup as well as bulky events, and so they're strictly vouchers because it's been so heavily used. So for example, for Woodland in 2018, when we had our bulky event, there was 740 cars that came through, and there was only 63.62 tons. Last year when we did the vouchers, 958 coupons, so that's cars. And there was 183.99 tons collected, and the diversion increased from 39% all the way to 51%. So it was a lot more material coming in, and it was a lot more diverted out of the landfill, which is always beneficial to any jurisdiction, especially when you're reporting to CalRecycle your guys' numbers in your annual reports. So Woodland's just an example, but again, Yolo's kind of following suit with this as well.
Yes. Comment and a question on one. Assuming this pilot program takes off, we're kind of doing that for the county in that with a coupon, my understanding is you can take electronic waste to the landfill any day they're open.
That is correct. At no charge, yeah.
So we're doing kind of getting in a sense.
So you guys aren't paying for that service through your voucher. So the Yolo County offers that services to anyone within the county and outskirts through grants that they get and funding that they get. So they take the e-waste, they take the household hazardous waste and things for free. You guys know what no jurisdiction pays through that I know of out of their rates. that's through county, grant funding, like from Cal Recycle or the state. Like their tire amnesty event that they had, I believe it was last year, that was through grants. And that was open to everyone. So the only thing that's changing, that would be the ratepayers, is just you're moving the bulky event from the courtyard to a voucher, which is just going directly to the landfill.
But you are correct that currently you can take some stuff for free anytime you want. And it's, so no, you're not, it's not, it's already an existing opportunity for you to divert stuff to the landfill. So.
It's just saving you a trip, I guess, so to speak. You could do it at one time instead of having to make 2 different trips.
Can I make a comment? So my understanding is that instead of having the bulky pickup on a day of the year that might or might not be convenient for Winters residents will now have a voucher that they can use when it is convenient for them. I'm talking about the bulky, not the bulky pickup in front of your house, the one at the courtyard, the courtyard pickup. So I will restate. So my understanding is that the courtyard pickup that might be inconvenient, more convenient for family, would be removed, and people would have a voucher, and they could go at their convenience. And if they needed a truck, and they didn't have a truck, they could borrow a truck. It's items that would fit in their trunk. They could take them in their trunk and get them to the landfill.
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Okay.
And I've already spoke with Marissa at Yolo County, and we're gonna work on the reporting. So every time a voucher comes in every month, she'll be giving me a copy of those, so I'll be keeping track of that. And then we'll be able to track, the tons, and we'll be able to come and present back to council at the end of the year how well the program did, hopefully.
And planning to do, I think, door to door on the vouchers, because one of the concerns is that people don't look at stuff when they get it in the mail. So if you throw away your voucher, well, now you've lost your opportunity. But
Yeah, so we've had the roller skater. I don't know if you guys have ever seen them, but we hire frequent flyers to come out, and especially in winters, to hand deliver or just hang the bag on the door with items. So we'll be having him come back around with the vouchers and hang on the door, so that way they're not misplaced.
I'm thinking that people will see that more readily than the regular bill that comes in the mail.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
What about multifamily? Is it not a problem?
So in the contract, don't quote me, it's been a minute. I do believe that they have the option of curbside. No one's utilized it that I know of, but they do have that option.
So the other questions that I have don't really deal with the bulky drop off part, but with the rate increases. So we haven't talked a lot about that. So we signed a contract with Waste Management 2 years ago, 10-year contract, so we're 2 years into that. And in that contract, it allows for increases based on the CPI. But the part on the tipping is the tipping charges. When that contract was put together by Waste Management, was that figured into that contract, or?
So there is a section in there for tipping fees, but it's written under the extraordinary rate request section, which typically is odd. Normally we have tipping fees wrapped in with the CPI, especially if we're being designated as a hauler to a specific location to deliver the material. And so usually it's packaged together and presented together, and then the tipping fees roll in with the CPI, which is the annual rate increase. But for this particular contract, the way it was laid out was you have your annual CPI, and then you have to do an extraordinary rate request, which will require us to come before council every year for tipping fees. So this amendment just allows us to package it together as one component instead of having to come back multiple times.
And it means we don't have to do the Prop 218 notices as often as much as good.
Correct, yeah.
And the way it was explained to me when I talked to the city manager about this, one of the requirements of the city of Winters is that the waste be kept there, not taken to another landfill, because there's costs associated with the shutdown and closing of landfill. So we're tied into costs to shut down that landfill when and if that day comes. And if we start asking you to haul to another landfill instead, because it might be a little cheaper, then we're tied into cost for closing that one as well. So
that is correct.
Something that we are that's a request on the city's part in that contract. So something else to be clear.
Mayor, one thing, and Carol may have mentioned this, and I just didn't know, but I think it's important to note, is that the tip fee increase only applies to the extent that the tip fee exceeds the CPI adjustment for that year.
Okay.
So there's a calculation in the amendment that we worked on so that, it's not one on top of the other. So to the degree it's factored into the CPI, it has to exceed that. So
Okay.
it's a situation where the CPI by itself isn't accommodating the tip fee. That's a situation where they have to come forward with that.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, any other questions? Is there anyone in the public that has questions on this? Yes, please, come forward.
Deborah Palmer of Graffway. I'm a new resident and I just wanted to get clarification on my waste management bill. It includes green waste, my regular trash and recyclables. And I'm of the impression in the near future, some of the pickup that is done on the streets might be going away. Is that part of the green waste?
That is part of the green waste.
So I'm thinking as a consumer, before you calculate any adjustments in our rates, if you're gonna add something for the bulky, if we're gonna lose any of our benefits, that is that street pickup of the green waste in the streets, will we be compensated for less service? And maybe it's a wash.
So the street pickups are not anything that's on our agenda tonight. That's not part of the discussion that we're having in this particular agenda item, but that is definitely something to consider when and if that does come back to us. That's a very good point, yeah.
And then my other question, actually, it's an observation. As a new resident here, I called to get the rates for my trash pickup. Never in the 3 conversations I had did they mention this bulky fee of, I think it's $67 a month.
Every other month.
Every other month?
And
For your entire bill.
Yeah.
In the, it's like it comes out about $56 a year that you're paying.
Is that a one-time thing?
No, it's added on, it's a line item on your existing bill.
It's built into your basic rates
It's
that
about
you pay.
$5 or $6 a month that you're paying.
Okay,
So
maybe I
everyone's-
misread it. I thought I saw it was like almost $60
No.
for 1 month, and that just was a red flag. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, so everybody is already paying $5.67 or something like that a month. And so whether or not you use that bulky pickups, you're still paying for that fee. So.
Yeah.
$491, yeah, is what you're paying for the bulky events now. So, every 2 months, or every month, excuse me, so. Turns out about $56 a month is what people are paying, so.
But if people don't use
Use it,
the bulky waste
Right.
drop off, then the waste management process.
Right, I didn't, because I have gotten called on, they like to say, well, it's free, but it's not exactly free, because you are actually paying it. So we try to encourage people to use it, and we've been doing more advertising, and more people are using the curbside, I would say.
Yeah.
It's gone up quite a bit.
I have numbers on that too. But yeah, we sat down, I want to say earlier this year, end of last year, to figure out how we could promote the curbside bulky a little bit more, because it wasn't being highly participated. So we came up with a new, I'm not sure, hopefully you guys have seen it, but the new postcards that we sent out about bulky and advertising it. And since we've done that, the numbers have increased pretty significantly month over month. So more people are getting familiar, more people are using the yearly bulky curbside. So
It's a good service to have, because the alternative is if we don't have it, as we've seen in past years, people will take it out in the country and just dump it on dump it in the county road and leave it, and then the county has to deal with it. So it's definitely a good service to have. Okay. Yes, Ms. Loudon.
Tina Loudon. The federal government has not given us a CPI for our social security, and yet you're increasing the CPI again for waste management. And I'm just, there are a lot of people who are very marginalized, and I'd just like you to have that in consideration, please. I do believe what Carol's doing and what waste management's doing is as far as on the management of our waste, but please consider the seniors, and please consider those that are marginalized, please.
Thank you. There are other factors to consider too. I know the federal and state regulations get tougher and tougher and tougher on how we can dispose of all of our waste. And as they put more regulations on, that drives the cost of dealing with all that stuff higher. So they have to be passed on. I understand the concern with the people who are having a hard time getting by as it is, and adding a few more dollars a month to some people does really matter to them. So thank you for bringing that up. Other questions, comments? Comments from the public? None, I will open it for a motion.
I will move to approve the staff recommendation on waste management and to allow for increase in the service rate and also to add the full fee pickup change on a 1-year basis.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on tonight's agenda is the fire engine engineer FTE position. Chief Lopez.
Good evening, Chief Lopez, Honorable Mayor, council members. Come to you tonight with the request in allowing me to hire a full-time engineer position that is needed in the fire department. To give you a little background behind the need for this, the Winters Fire Department is partially what we call a combination department. We have a few career staff, literally 4, and a majority of our membership consists of volunteers. We rely heavily on our volunteers to staff daily and respond to emergencies with career staff. And over the years, we've experienced a significant decline in volunteerism as a whole. This is not a local problem, it's actually a nationwide problem. Recently, Yola County Fire Department agencies conducted a study with volunteerism in Yola County. And since 2008 to 2018, we've seen a significant decline of about 29% in volunteering. So that's one contributing factor in our volunteer participation. But when we lack volunteers, the workload falls on the backs of the career staff, where we have to pick up the extra work or the pieces and making sure that we maintain staffing. This engineer position would be staffed on a 40-hour work week schedule initially to meet the needs of the department and emergencies in the community. It will provide additional support for the captains on duty and having a dedicated driver operator, which we don't have right now. As an example, Captain Shane Bobengard is the captain on duty tonight, and he is a resident firefighter with them. Shane is the driver operator as well as the line supervisor. So adding this driver operator position would be a tremendous benefit in utilizing personnel, the deployment of our resources within our community. To note, the last time the Winters Fire Department has added a full-time position was in 1988 under the Winters Fire District. So it's been some significant time since we've added full-time staffing. A lot has changed since 1988. There's a lot more training mandates today that we have to meet and comply with, and obviously the needs in meeting the needs in the community. We have active development within our community. That's very apparent today in fire prevention. We're very active and busy with inspections and code enforcement, in particular with new development. So my request is that you approve or allow me to hire one full-time engineer position to the fire department. As far as the budget and financial impact, right now we've gone through the budget with Shelley, our finance director. We've done some trimming so that there wouldn't be any impacts to the fire department's fund. We're not increasing our budget to add this position. And we'll make this fit into our existing budget. Any questions?
Questions? I do have a couple questions. As you say, it's fitting into our current budget. But what happens when we come up with our next budget? Do you think that will require an increase for the next budget request?
Yeah, and that will definitely cause to increase, and we need to work through that. Some of the adjustments we've made in reductions is to our operating budget to help offset that. The other thing is because we lack the volunteer participation within our program, we've utilized the reserve stipend benefits that we provide for volunteers. So because we have low participation, we're not having to necessarily pay the stipend fees for that. We've utilized that to offset the cost for that. Moving forward, as we continue to recruit volunteers, which we will need to maintain a volunteer fire department for some time to come, well beyond when I'm retired. So this is not by any means that, we're going to convert to a fully paid department, and we simply cannot afford that. So it may require some budget adjustments as we go through the 2-year cycle of our budget planning, and we'll work very diligently to fit within those means.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the need for adding another position with, we haven't added one since 1988. We've grown significantly since 1988. I don't know what the numbers will be from 88 until now, but I know our population has increased. And with the volunteerism decreasing, we need to have people, that can be in those trucks and respond to the calls when they come in.
And I don't mean to put maybe a negative impression in our volunteer program. We have a tremendous volunteer program, and they are very dedicated. The evolution of our volunteer program has changed over the years just by simply the model of transitioning to a 24-hour department. And with our program, we recruit and attract a lot of college students that are pursuing the fire service as a career. So kind of a testament to our department and our program. As an example, 13 of our members each year are hired with CAL FIRE. And they get deployed and they go out and work as seasonal firefighters, which is good, but it takes away from our volunteer program. And the way that CAL FIRE has modeled their seasonal work, it's really no longer seasonal. They're hiring year round, they're deployed year round. As you know, California fire season and how it's been historically over the past 3 to 5 years has been pretty devastating to California and impacts small agencies like us very tremendously. So the good thing with our volunteer program, they're getting hired with other agencies, which is the ultimate goal, is to see them catch their ride with another agency. So.
Yeah, so I definitely have no problems with what we're looking at tonight. The fact that we have to figure out how to, I like the fact that we brought a lot of people in, they come in and get their training. Some of them have moved on to full-time positions with us. I mean, we also know that the volunteer part of it, and I think about, how it used to be. We had a fire chief, and when there was a fire call, the siren would sound and people would jump in their cars or their trucks and they go to the fire and respond. And times have changed. We don't have that kind of situation anymore. People are, the volunteers, they also work full-time jobs, and it's hard to do. So we need to evolve, but the times that have changed you will, I think, so. Other comments I have? Anybody else have any other comments? If not, I'll open it up for a motion. Thank you.
I'll move staff recommendation to add a full-time employee to the fire department.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? Passes unanimously. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, the next agenda item is the planning projects update.
Mayor and Council, just a couple comments. This is an item that I've just brought back to update the council and the community on some of the things we're working on as far as overall planning projects go. I've included the one table that kind of gives you an overview of the list of all the projects that we have. One of the things I've included in the agenda packet is the narrative for what they call the supplemental page to Appendix B. That was actually what we sent in with our SB2 application. Key components of that included the specific plan, programmatic environmental impact report, community outreach. I've included all this, the scope of the work that we put in the SB2 application. One of the questions that came up today has to do with the schedule and timeline that's included in that narrative. That is for the EIR process that we had to outline for the overall SB2. We anticipate that everything will begin as early as January of 2020. In all the community outreach, as we start doing a lot of the background reports, one of the things we have to wait is to get approval of our grant application from state HCD regarding all of this. Today I attended a workshop in Sacramento with state HCD on housing elements. Based on today, I can tell you that the one difference, and we'll update it in the overall project table, we need to move the housing element right up as a January 2020 project. We have to start working on that immediately. Our due date on our housing element is actually October of 2021, but we actually have to have the due date of the housing element will be in May of 2021. So we have, there's no time to wait on this. We have to get it going. The climate action plan, I've included a table in there that shows the overall funding. We're going to look to fund that primarily through what they call AB 101 funding. That was some of the state budget funding that came through. The climate action plan and climate will come back to the council on December 20 or December 17th. Chris has left the room.
He just left.
He just left. Just gonna say something nice about him. I guess I'll say something nice about him. Chris is doing a great job because he's not here. Total programming for the entire program over roughly about a 30-month period is almost $395,000. That includes the budget, the funding sources, and the projects that are included. To give you a perspective, combined what all this we're hoping to deliver, going through general plan updates on a lot of key documents, and that will be accomplished through not only the housing element. Part of the task of putting together the programmatic EIR will require a pretty comprehensive general plan review. And are there going to be things that are going to pop up? Absolutely, they will. The specific plan, the housing element. The programmatic EIR is a critical element. You look at that, it's almost half of the entire budget, a little over $150,000 we just paid to spend. But what that EIR will cover is the specific plan. You can't have a climate action plan without an EIR. You have to do it. Every time, if you want to know what the fly in the ointment is, it's the EIR. It's extremely costly. I've tried to work with staff. I've talked with the various consultants with HCD on ways to shortcut everything. And they just laugh at me when I say, I need to get this below 150K. I mean, it's that tough. But we have the climate action plan, the housing element. Ultimately, are there going to be some general plan amendments, which will probably include zoning and other things? Yep, there will. So all those things can be locked into the EIR. One of the most important things that we're going to try and approach on an overall work plan for everything is trying to get timing where we can adopt all these things within the scope of the one EIR. This may shrink the overall project
from being a total of 30 months to probably shortening some things down to more like 18 to 24 months on some things. One of the key elements of this, we have some money coming out of the SACOG planning grant. I'm going to meet with them over the course of the next couple of weeks in trying to figure out how the community outreach is going to work. The benefit of having Chris here is that on the climate stuff, we've already got 3 documents that are really good to merge in. What we need the extra money to pay for is the technical analysis. If we can appreciate on the climate action plan, you not only need the policy areas, but you also need the technical analysis. There's a whole technical side to it. Don't have the technical, it doesn't count. So that's what we need. I've labeled, I think, $60,000 in the for the climate action stuff. Most of that's going to go straight into technical analysis. So anyway, the goal is to probably hit this pretty aggressively. And like I said, the climate stuff will come back on the 17th. And then I anticipate over the course of the next couple of weeks to get some comments and feedback back from HCD regarding our grant application. Today they said that to date they've received, it was like 360 or 380 grant applications. They, as things happen, I worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to put together the SB2 grant. And I came downstairs and I got Diana, get the FedEx guy over here. We got to get this thing out the door. No sooner does the FedEx guy drive down the street, I get an email. They extended the deadline on submitting the grant. So they've extended the grant to December 20th because they expect that every city in California is going to submit on that thing. Correlation between the SB2 and the things that we heard today regarding housing element are all driving. They are all lining up. So anyway, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
So with every city applying, is there enough money to go around?
There is. It's probably the biggest cash and money that the state has ever given for planning. It's absolutely unheard of. We get the bottom of the barrel amount. We get 160 grand out of it. There were some cities that the typical cities getting 300 and something thousand to do the work on it. Today they listed a couple of other grants that I think I'm gonna have to get with Councilmember New, and he's gonna have to use his cachet with SACOG. But there are some other grants that are coming down that, for example, the AB 101 grant, we get 65,000. There are some cities that get, I'd say like Los Angeles is getting 1.7 million out of it, and there's still some flexibility. So we're gonna have to use our juice at SACOG to see if we can get a little bit more money for some of these things.
Thank you for putting all the work in and meeting the deadline, even though it was extended.
That's right. And just a comment on it, as John said, there's a lot of money that's out there, and it's the most money that the state has ever put forward. However, every meeting that I've attended, they've emphasized the fact that they're putting out the money because they want results, and they're really not going to let anybody slip by and not meet their housing numbers. So we have to be prepared for that, and it's not going to be easy. The last slide, and I'll send out the presentation, but the last slide in today's workshop was how they will turn you over to the Attorney General if you aren't meeting. that they want done.
I just had a question if the Institute for Local Government has any programs that would help us.
Yes, absolutely. The Institute for Local Government, ILG, we are absolutely contacting them to, one of the things, and I'm going to work up something that we will bring to the council probably on January 7th on community outreach is, right now I'm doing research to find out groups that have highly effective ways of getting quality community outreach in today's world. Councilmember New and I heard a presentation from Smart Growth America, contacting them. ILG, absolutely. To find some local sources. One of the things that I would love to do is maybe have our own little workshop on looking at some options and getting input from our community on, hey, what are some things that people think that will work in our community on trying to get community quality input in everything. Because we've heard it loud and clear. People want to have input in everything, and we absolutely need to do that. And there are a lot of professionals out there that
Comments? Thank you, John. So the only other thing we have is our information item, which is the September and October treasurer and reports for these meetings. Review. Do we have a city manager report tonight?
I'm sorry, was there public comment? Was
public comment on
For the information item?
Yep.
Sure, come on, absolutely.
All right. Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And thank you so much to the city manager for putting in time on this and for bringing this to the attention. And let's see, first, just a basic question, which I think has probably been answered, but looking at the packet as posted on the website, it just says staff recommends city council, but there wasn't anything after that. And so I wasn't sure if there was action.
there's no action.
There's no
It's just
action.
an
Okay,
information.
all right, well then, great. Check that one off. And just with the general plan adequacy review, I'm just hoping that there'll be discussion at some point about what the metrics will be and what the process will be of the general plan adequacy review. And I know that's something that's been touched on previously, including at the August joint planning meeting. And let's see, there's mention of community workshop, not workshops, and I'm hoping that that is a minor but significant missing S. I'm in favor of workshops. Certainly as we went through the Complete Streets process, and I think 2009, 2010, having multiple workshops with that was really fruitful. And by having discussions and then having it be iterative and then come back, and with the consultants being able to facilitate it, that got a much better product at the end. Let's see, with the pre-approved designs, I'm hoping that I would like for us to retain the ability to have adaptive management and what's there, sort of city-led adaptive management. And so just because something that we decide now would probably be the way to go as we start having, particularly, for example, infill projects, since this is city limits specific plan. If it looks like something isn't working, is there a way for us to adjust that? Or are we locking ourselves in with something pre-approved? And let's see, there's mention of establish the climate committee to review draft climate action plan and strategy. And Councilmember Lauren directed staff on April 16th that this be a climate commission and reiterated that at the beginning of the last meeting. So I'm just hoping that moving forward that that's reflected in the documents. And with that, I want to say a big thank you to Chris Flores for some good conversation about that. I really appreciate the work he's putting on that. And last one is a question. I'm just checking that this grant application wording would not be in lieu of council and planning commission having the opportunity to give direction and have discussion about what exactly the city limits specific plan would be and what our process will be moving forward with that. Again, I really appreciate what staff has done with the application, but I want to make sure that the council and possibly planning commission, if that's appropriate, have an opportunity to discuss what the process will be and what our hope for outcome will be. I think that that would be a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Good comments. Anyone else would like to comment? Seeing none, we'll move to the city manager's report.
Just real quick, so Sunday I'm gonna run the California International Marathon. And one of the things that, over the number of marathons that I've been running, you know, a lot of the time you like to, you know, basically dedicate your marathon to doing something. Last year I dedicated to some friends who were battling breast cancer. We're closing out 2019, and in 2019, within our area, we've had 10 law enforcement people who have died in the line of duty, including 2 young officers. Literally, we had Natalie Corona from Davis, who was murdered, and Tara O'Sullivan, who was murdered. So this Sunday, I'm going to go out and I'm going to run 26.2 miles, and hopefully I'm going to get a PR, and but I'm going to dedicate it to those 10 law enforcement people. Last year, I had an opportunity to, when I ran it with a young officer who he ran it with, he had his Sam Brown belt on, and he ran it in his police uniform, and I ran with him for 5 miles, and you know, he beat me. But anyway, it'll.
He's probably half your age, though, John.
Yeah, probably. Don't put that on me. Anyway, but also looking forward to the tractor parade this Saturday. I think, you know, from the city staff perspective, we're getting our stuff together. Should be a nice event, rain or shine.
Rain or shine.
Yes, so hope to see everybody at the tractor parade Saturday night. I know the chamber could still use volunteers, I'm sure. They've been needing help, so if anyone would like to volunteer, we can put you in contact with the chamber director and get you signed up. So thank you, everyone, and on that, we will adjourn the meeting at 8:33.